So let's now use this state feature to output more meaningful content than just these button identifiers here. And for that attached, you find an updated data.js file, which now also includes this examples constant that gets exported. And this constant here simply holds an object with keys that match these identifiers that are passed upon these button clicks. So state, props, JSX, and components. And then for those identifiers, we find nested JavaScript objects, which each have a title, description, and code property, which is that actual data that should be output here. For that, for styling purposes, I'll first of all add a div here with an ID of tab content. And inside of that div, I want to have an h3 element, which should output the title. Then below that, a paragraph, which should output the description. And below that, a pre-tag with a nested code element, which should output that code example stored in that code property here. So for that, we'll need to import this examples constant here into the app.jsx file, because that's where we're managing this state. So here I'll import from /data.js, and I'll import examples, this examples constant. And now we want to dive into this examples constant and use the data for the button that was clicked. So for the components, JSX, props button, and so on. And doing that is pretty simple. Since we're storing these identifiers in our state, we can just use this state to dynamically access the data for these different properties. Of course, this only works if these property names are exactly equal to your identifiers, so you should double check that this is the case for you. So that these identifiers here, which we're setting based on these button clicks, match the identifiers in this examples object. But with that, we can then go down here and, for example, set the h3 element to some dynamic content where we access this examples constant. And then we use square brackets to dynamically access a property, which also is some standard JavaScript syntax. And the name of the property we want to access will be stored in this selected topic state. And with that, we'll access one of these objects. And then I'm interested in the title here in this h3 element. So we should access .title on that nested object. And we can repeat this approach here for the paragraph element. And here it's the description property that should be accessed. And for the code here, it's the code property. And with that, we're accessing different data based on which button is selected. Now, of course, you'll note that if I reload, I now get an error here in the console, because initially, when this page first loads, we're not selecting a valid element here. Instead, initially, our initial state is this please click a button text. And this is therefore what this program tries to find as a property name in this examples object. And of course, there is no property called please click a button. So this doesn't work, and therefore to work around that, for the moment, I'll set this initial state to components, so that this is selected initially. With that, if I reload, the error is gone, and we see this components information here. And if I now click JSX, this switches to the JSX information, and the same is the case for props and state. So this now works and allows us to view different content based on which button was pressed.